Isn't that powerful? How we see ourselves and how others see us. And sometimes the world's apart. Jesus says, "They will know that you are my disciples by the way that you love one another." But the key thing in here is that you have to know yourself. You have to know who you are. You have to see yourself as beautiful and as glorious as what those around you see you too, for you to experience the fullness of what Jesus is talking about. Jesus offers a command. It's an imperative. This is my commandment. You love one another as I have loved you. Now think about it. Love is not something that you can force by will, right? My mother told us when she was growing up, her mother used to say to us, "I am going to make you love and respect me if I have to beat you and kill you." Needless to say, that probably didn't work very well. Because whenever you have to go about saying to yourself, if this is your affirmation when you start your day, "I'm going to love everybody today, I'm going to love everybody today, I'm going to love everybody today, I'm going to love everybody today. God just cut me off in traffic. Oh, nope, I'm going to love everybody today, I'm going to love everybody today." Chances are that whatever it is that you're wanting to share is not natural. It's not genuine. And we as human creatures created in the image of God can pick up on that in a heartbeat, you see. Love that Jesus is talking about is a natural pouring out from your core of who you are as a human. It's something that pours out from your soul. It's a natural thing, you see. So, okay, let me stop for a Today's sermon is going to be a little more academic than typically what I do, but it's going to serve a good purpose. All right? So let's look at the Koine Greek in which the New Testament was written in. It's a very expressive language, and sometimes when we understand the structure behind the language, we can see the message more clearly. So, the commandment, love one another, that's an imperative. It's a command. But in the Greek, the verb is connected to the subjunctive tense. So what that means is the subjunctive tense makes the imperative even more forceful. And what that means is this: love one another. But in order for you to love one another as I have loved you, it has to be something, you have to become the kind of person that can accomplish this. I mean, it's one thing for me to say to myself and to all of you, love everybody, love one another. But the reality is that we have to do whatever is necessary to become the kind of people who have the capacity to love each other as Jesus loved us. Does that make sense? It's just not something that just happens. I think we're born with it, but then we have to go through that whole growing up process and all the people who come along in our lives who help us to build walls around that love, that innocence, that purity. I was watching a video the other day of a little boy in a bathtub, or a child in a bathtub, an infant, and there was a puppy standing outside, and the puppy and the child were playing, and the cackling from the child was just hilarious. There's another one where a little child pulls out a drawer and the dog pushes the drawer back in, and oh, this was just so much fun. But it's the contagious laughter. You know that child is just laughing out of the pure delight of laughing. So what has to happen then for us to be able to become the kind of people that have the capacity to love each other as Jesus commanded? Well, I think one of the things is we have to live with each other. Isn't it a lot easier to love the world around you when all you have to do is write a check or send a prayer? That's easy, isn't it? Seriously. There's no risk involved in that. When Jesus said this, he was speaking to his disciples. He was speaking to the inner circle. You guys, love each other as I have loved you. And Judas has just gone to betray him, and he knew it. You see, when you choose to be community, when you choose to be family, you have to take risk. To love somebody as Jesus loved us means that you have to be patient with one another. And even though it's very clear for me to see your flaws, and it's very easy for you to see mine, and it's very easy and tempting for us to judge one another for that. If we're going to love each other as Jesus loved us, then that means rather than judging, we're going to do whatever we can to help each other to become the human beings God created us to be. It's taking risk. It's being patient. It's being tolerant. It's being slow to judge. It's being big on mercy. It's taking the risk and the time to see each other and be in a relationship with each other. The progressive dinner last night worked beautifully, as Denise mentioned earlier today, because, see, she got an opportunity to sit at a table with people that she had seen but did not know, and she even feels more affirmed that this is home for her. You see how that works? Now, what she doesn't know is we've been planning this dinner for a long, long time so Denise would stay in Central Florida. Now, that's kind of a big fat lie, but but because you all love me like Jesus does, you let me get by with stuff like that. I discovered years ago that it seems the great struggle and the great triumph in life is not good triumphs over evil, but rather soul triumphs over ego. And the one thing that keeps us from being able to understand and experience this capacity to love as Jesus commands us to do is our ego. Because you see, that ego is a part of who we are as a human creature that protects us. If you've been hurt and you've taken the risk to love and you've been hurt, then what is your temptation? Close yourself off. Hide yourself. Don't put yourself out there again. Or your love is conditional. I will love you as long as you're doing what I need you to do, and then as soon as you start behaving otherwise, then what do? We close up and we go away and hope that maybe we'll find love in another place, you see. That's not the kind of love that Jesus is talking here when he gives us a command that we love one another as he has loved us. Love is the riskiest thing you can ever do in your life. The kind of love that Jesus is talking about gets you killed. Someone will assassinate you. Someone will put you on a cross. Someone will put you in prison. You see, that's some risky business. Someone will take advantage of you. But if you know that going in, and that's a part of the gig, and you're willing to take that risk, and you know that if someone does abuse or exploit or use your love, that it's not the end of the world and that it's okay, that you can then move on and continue, then somehow it makes it somewhat easier. Our job as disciples of Jesus is to love one another as he loved us. And Jesus says, they will recognize that you are my disciples in the way that you love one another. And that's our purpose, isn't it, as the Windermere Union Church? That's a part of who we are. This is what we decided was going to be our number one thing to do, is to take care of one another in such a way, and in such a profound way, that it will strengthen our congregation, and then that makes what we do for the world outside of us even that much greater. Now, Kunkel is a psychologist, and he has many wonderful insights on this whole thing about egocentricity. He says, this kind of love flows naturally and creatively from our center. However, egocentricity, if not dealt with, can block this love. So he describes 4 different categories of egocentricity. Now, our egocentricity can be expressed in a myriad of different ways. But these 4 are not complete, but I think you will get the point. It's the clinging vine, the star, the tyrant, and the turtle. Kind of sounds like a title of a children's book, doesn't it? The clinging vine. How does that affect our ability to experience fully the kind of love that Jesus is talking about? Let's say you have some parents who have a child, and this child is more precious than any child in the world. Literally, all the children in the world come second to this sweet little bundle of joy. And because you as parents have experienced hardship and you've experienced pain, you're committed beyond any reasonable doubt that you're going to make sure this little one never gets harmed and never has to struggle. So you do it, and you work, and you protect, and you hover, and you smother, and you make sure that this little child has a bubble as it grows up, that nothing will ever hurt it. But guess what you're teaching the child? That they can't stand on their own 2 feet. You know the story of the butterfly, right? And someone saw it struggling to get out of its cocoon, and they thought that they would help it out, so they took the cocoon off for it, and it could never fly. Why? Because it was in the struggle of getting out of the cocoon that it had strength to be able to flap its wings and fly. That's what struggle and hardship and pain and suffering does for us. It teaches us how to get through it and stand on our own 2 feet. It's a curse and a blessing all at the same time. I know that's hard to believe, but at this stage in my life, I realize it because who I am today is a result of all the struggles I have been through. So the message to the clinging vine is, I cannot handle life by myself. I must have somebody else to be there to be my strength and my protector. Like the clinging vine, it must attach itself to a tree because the vine cannot stand on its own. So what happens when mommy and daddy go away? They're no longer there to protect this child. Then the child needs other people to lean upon. And in order to make that happen, they have to create a need for you to feel sorry for them. Am I right? Uh-oh, I think I may be getting close to home for some of you. That's all right. There are 3 other categories, and the rest of the people will find themselves in those. So. Because they do not believe they have the capacity to stand on their own, they must cling themselves to someone else and thus becoming extremely needy and being a victim. And in order for you to help them, you must say, oh my God, that poor little soul, they're so needy and they're such a victim. Look, I'm a big, strong person. I will help them. And while you're helping them, they're going to praise you. They're going to celebrate. You're going to be one of God's saints. But the day will come when you think that they have sucked me dry. I have nothing left to give. And I'm kind of mad because they won't do anything for themselves. And you walk away, then they will hate you. Why will they hate you? Because you abandoned them. And so what do they do then? Do they learn how to stand on their own 2 feet? No. They find somebody else to cling themselves to and suck them dry. And the best thing that can happen to the clinging vine is for them to realize there's no one willing to help them anymore. And that usually comes in a time of great crisis and a time of great reflection. And then through help, they learn that, oh my God, I had the capacity within myself all this time to deal with the events and the things that the world brings me. But if you're a clinging vine, you lack the capacity to love, like Jesus said, because you've built the shell around your heart and your soul. You don't have the ability to love naturally as an expression of who you are. You can only love those who are helping you at the time, and when they stop, then you hate. That has nothing to do with Jesus. And if a clinging vine wants to experience fully the love that Jesus is talking about here, they have to go through the period of insight and reflection and struggle. And struggle, and take those risks and learn they can. And then through all the struggle, what can they do? Spread their wings and what? Fly. The next child is the star child. Very similar kind of parents. The parents realize this child is very special. The child is good looking. The child has incredible talents, and every opportunity they have, they set the child up, and the child performs and gets all the adoration and all the praise. And the child thinks to himself, well, I like all this adoration and all this praise. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel special. And what happens is they go through life, they find every opportunity they can to perform, to shine, to be perfect, to make perfect grades, because when you get perfect grades, you can be adored and worshipped. Whenever you are perfect in every way, everybody around you celebrates you because you're so perfect. But what happens to this child is their sense of self-worth is in their receiving adoration and their perfection. What happens if people ignore them? They fall apart. Why? Because their whole sense of self is that you're praising and worshiping them. If they make a mistake, they fall apart. Why? because their whole sense of self-worth is in their perfection, or your perception, at least, that they're perfect. The worst thing in the world for the star is to be scorned, to be laughed at, and ultimately to be ignored. But it's the best thing for those things to happen, because what happens when they experience that the whole world is not celebrating and adoring them at all times, they start to realize that their self-worth and their beauty comes not from what we receive outside, but how we feel about who we are on the inside, you see. Now, the clinging vine and the star are a perfect storm for one another. Because the clinging vine needs someone to cling to, and the star needs to be adored. But both are enabling one another and continuing to enable the reality that their core, their soul, the heart, is still blocked, and they cannot experience this incredible love that Jesus talks about. The third, the tyrant. A child who grows up in an environment completely opposite of the other two. Their parents are horrible, if they even have parents. They're tyrants, they're bullies, they beat them, they punish, they're neglectful, they abandon, they do all these, they're horrible human beings, and yet they have children. And let's say there's more than one child in the house. Maybe the children may acquiesce to their parents' bullying, but there's that child who will not, who will stand up, who's assertive, and who will not knuckle and buckle under their tyranny. What does that child learn? Protect yourself at all costs. I will never let anybody get in close, because if I do, they can bully me. And then what often happens is the child who is doing all he can to protect himself becomes a bully himself. And in times becomes a worse tyrant than his parents. The perfect career for a child growing up like this is to be a dictator. When you get the power of state behind you, in an army too, you're free to practice your tyranny until what? You come up against another bully and another tyrant who's better at it than you. You see. So what will happen to a tyrant in the work world? They will bully. They will run over. They will try to control, until they get a boss that's a better tyrant than they are. And what will happen to a bully when someone stands up to them is usually the bully will become submissive. So the bully becomes submissive to his boss at work, and then when he goes home, where he has a clinging vine wife and scared children, he will go home and take his wrath out on them. You see, the bully is not asking for your love or your adoration. All the bully wants from you is your submissiveness and your obedience. But they will never experience that kind of love that Jesus is talking about here, because their ego has built this incredible hard shell and wall around their heart. The last one is a turtle. That's right, a turtle. What comes to mind? Whenever there's a threat around you, you retreat into your shell. There's a story in Gospel of John, chapter 5, about there's a special pool in Jerusalem that every once in a while all the waters of the pool gurgle up to the top and disturbs water. And so all the infirmed would gather around the pool, because the belief was that if you were the first one to jump in when the waters start bubbling, then you would be healed of whatever your infirmity was. So you would see the blind, the deaf, and the lame would be there. And Jesus approached this pool one day, and he saw a man lying on his mat. And this guy caught his attention. And as he got to inquire about who this man was, he found out that this man had been by this pool for 38 years. So Jesus questioned him. He said, "Do you want to be well? I have come by this pool for 38 years. And every time the water starts to gurgle, someone else jumps in before me. You mean after 38 years you never found a way to get yourself into the pool and to get healed?" And Jesus looks at him and says, "Pick up your mat and walk away." And it wasn't no miracle. He never had a problem. He never was infirmed. And Jesus says, if you come back here and do this again, 10 times more will come worse to you than what you've already experienced. So there are people in this world who have learned that if I stay sick all the time, then I have to have the responsibility of living healthy. If I can somehow create an environment where I just have people taking care of me all the time, I have an excuse for not ever what? Trying. Now, the people who are going to feel most guilty about this are those who are sick all the time. I'm not talking, for those who are really genuinely sick. I'm not talking about you. You know who I'm talking about. Those people who go to the emergency room and after 5 days at the hospital they can't find out what's wrong and they send them home. And this happens over and over and over again. We call them hypochondria. Does that mean that they don't experience the symptoms that they feel that they have? Of course they do. It's psychosomatic. Your brain will make your body feel whatever you're thinking at the time. But the turtle is someone who is so afraid to live, they create an environment and a support system to keep them small and sick. And if you're a person who lives like this, you do not have the capacity to be able to experience the kind of love that Jesus is talking about in this passage. Jesus knows this about his disciples. And when you read it in the subjunctive imperative Greek text, you realize as one who's reading it in the Greek that, okay, this is a process. This is something you become. Because Peter, who loved Jesus more than anything else, right? I will never, ever desert you, Jesus. I am Superman. As soon as he got to the courtyard where Jesus was being tried, and he was asked, how many times? Do you know this, Jesus? And he denied Jesus how many times? 3. Jesus knew this about his disciples. This is why he gave them that command, that they go through the process, that they realize this is something that you become. And this is why I want you to hear it. I have spent my whole adult life facing my own demons, facing my own trials and tribulations, facing my own egocentricities. And I've worked through most of them, but I have a couple of more that I have to work on. Bear with me. But because I have been that butterfly trapped in the cocoon of my own egocentricity, and I'm working my way out, it strengthens me to a place where I can offer to you all that I have learned, so that you can come out of your cocoon as well. And not only what I have learned, but there's a plethora of people in the world around you who have struggled, who have overcome, who inspire us, who encourage us. But we have to be willing to do the work. Do you want to be well? Do you want to experience this? Jesus asked. Do you want to become my disciple? If you really want it, then you have to do the work. You have to be able to see how your ego, which you think is protecting you, is really keeping you and the world around you from seeing the core of who you are. And the core of who you are, and your soul screams out every day, please let me out. And that's why oftentimes we find ourselves doing something really stupid, getting ourselves into trouble, because in that moment of crisis is when we go seek help, and then the process of healing and open ourselves comes into being. I feel, and I believe with all of my heart, that we are being disciples of Jesus Christ because we commit ourselves to loving one another. And if you're going to go through this process, and if you're going to really experience it fully, then you must have a safe place where you can try it all out. Am I right? And you, Windermere Union Church, create an environment for people to come and be as stupid and as mean and as needy and as sickly as they need to be, at the same time encouraging them to grow and to heal. That, my friends, is salvation. That is the purpose and the mission of Jesus. As we all work together to make ourselves healthier, as we all work together to take the risk to open ourselves up completely so that the world sees how we love one another and heal one another, and then how we then can spread out and branch out and pour out a love that is genuine. I have been in churches where people have shaken my hand and they said, "Good to see you, brother, good to see you," and I didn't believe it for a heartbeat. No, you're not glad to see me. You've already looked away from me and you don't even ask me my name. But the Windermere Union Church, if you want to be shy and anonymous, you're going to struggle. And if you come up to us and go, we'll give you some space. But we're going to love you. You know why? Because we too needed that love and still do. We too needed a community that loves us and accepts us for who we are. And we too have experienced this knowledge and this faith. You see, faith in God is not an intellectual exercise. It's an experiential soul exercise. How do you know that there's a God? How can you prove to me that there's a God? I don't have to prove it in a mathematical formula or show you. I feel it. I've experienced it. I know it. So Windermere Union Church, for those of you who are here, who are paralyzed by your ego, know that when you choose to break from the cocoon, it's a soul choice. Take the risk. It will be worth it. I promise you. Take the risk. Life is so much better when you do. And congregation, may we continue to commit ourselves to not only healing from within us, but to minister to one another. Because as we do so, we become stronger. We become more powerful. And when the world sees us, they know that we are Jesus' disciples. Why? Because of the way we love one another. I don't know about you, but that's a cause worth living for me. And I will do it for the rest of my life. To bring the reality of God and Jesus Christ into something not as an overbearing imperative that no one ever achieves, but rather an experiential reality of God's love in our midst through one another. I hope the long lesson has been worth it. It's what happens when you send me on a week of vacation. I lose my editing skills. This is important stuff, though. And I want to see every soul here thrive and break out of the cocoons of your own making. There's no need for you to be needy. There's no need for you to cling. There's no need for you to be perfect. We're not looking for perfection. We're just looking for you. There's no need for you to be a bully. Let it go. That's a horrible responsibility to have to keep. And there's no reason for you to avoid life by pretending that somehow you have the capacity to face it. Love one another as I have loved you, and the world will know you are my disciples because of the way you, what? Love one another. The world will know that we are Jesus' disciples because of the way we... I'm almost convinced. The world will know that we are Jesus' disciples because of the way we love one another. Thus ends the lesson. Let us pray. God, thank you so much for leading me to this place almost 18 years ago. Thank you so much for allowing me to worship and to serve